I'm Peter from the Daily Rios.
And I'm Eric from Longbox Review. And this is episode 24 of Peter and Eric's Legion Project podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Legion Project podcast. This is episode 24, and I am your host, Eric.
And I'm your other host, Peter.
And we are here today to discuss issue 24 of the third volume of the Legion of Superheroes title, sometimes referred to as the Baxter Run. How you doing today?
Good. Doing pretty good. Excited to talk about this issue. Excited to wrap up the Who is Sensor Girl mystery within the next 2-3 issues. Excited that we've hit issue 24, which is basically the end of year 2.
That's right. As we approach, the beginning, and we're pretty close to almost starting year 3 of the podcast.
Right. That's okay. That's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is I'm realizing that I'm getting to the end of comics that I know really well. So I think post Who is Sensor Girl, there's a stretch of comics that I remember reading, I think, but I don't remember them well. So I'm kind of excited for year 3 and beyond because there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff outside of like the Universo project or Superboy story that I'm like, I don't remember this. I don't remember sequences. I don't remember dialogue. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, and similar, because as I think I've said this before on a few occasions now, but I am currently in issues which I have never read. And so all of this, the stuff that we're in right now, and then up to the Superboy stuff that's coming up, all new to me as far as I can recall. So
very cool.
Yeah, I'm coming into this blind and very excited about it.
Great. By the way, happy 10th anniversary of podcasting.
Thank you.
You should tell them about the episode you just put out.
Yeah, so at the time of this recording, I just released, shortly after the anniversary, my 10 years of podcasting, episode 182, which is listener feedback, or listener questions, sorry. That's the name of the episode. So yeah, I had some wonderful listeners, and Peter was one of those. So thank you, Peter. Those were really great questions.
Sure.
So I got some questions and answered them for well over an hour. Well, I guess I rambled on for quite a bit there at the beginning about just kind of podcasting and the show in general, and then answered the questions. So, but it was a lot of fun. A lot of questions that I had to really think about, and it was interesting to discover the answers myself, and because some of the questions are like, it was easy to answer. There were obvious answers to them from my perspective. But then things like some of the questions that you asked, Peter, were like, that's really interesting. I've never thought of those things before, or thought about them in that way. So it was really a process of discovery for me as well. So it was so much fun. I feel like I should do that more often.
Look, you're not a podcaster unless you spend 20 minutes talking about podcasting.
Yeah, but I felt like I was kind of pushing my luck there. I mean, I got into geeky stuff about microphones, so come on.
It's like I said, those of us who were there during the Wild West days, we had to talk about that stuff because we didn't have, podcatchers and pre iTunes days and all that, and then even post, it was like, what server are you with? Who are you with? What's cheap? Let's put all our stuff together on an RSS feed,
Yes.
Nowadays, everybody has it easy.
Yeah, that's true. And, of course I came into it right at the, maybe just after the beginning of the easy phase that was coming in. So, I didn't have to do a lot of work, but man, it's been so much fun. And I talked about this in the episode, but that opened the door to things like this, the Legion Project, and talking with you and a bunch of other people too. It's been that aspect of it, not just talking about the subject matter that we talk about week to week or month to month, year to year, but just having conversations with people has been one of the blessing of doing the show. So I love it.
Awesome. Congratulations. Speaking of feedback, can we jump into some of the stuff that we've gotten about some of our previous episodes?
Mm-hmm.
So I have two here. One from Chris, Charlton Hero. Several thoughts about issues 18 through 21. And, as always, we read everything, but I'm just going to pick out some select things here. He says, it appears DC was mandated with some of these issues with selling some action figures when the Legion went up against Tyr and Taraz. So he's talking about the two-part controller sequel story. I would have loved this issue as a kid, as it was all action and you get to see the Legion in combat. That said, I never did buy that Tyr superpower action figure, but now I suddenly want to hunt it down. Go figure. Their marketing ploys still work. How about a Taraz World Action playset? I feel that was a missed opportunity to take my childhood money. And he says the backup features are hit and miss. However, the Invisible Kid backup in issue 19 was better than the main book. They made me care about this hero for once. They had a great concept to build characters with these mini-stories, but many of them are included as page-filling laughs, like the Dream Girl and White Witch secret birthday story in issue 20. Come on. The high point was the Censor Girl mystery. To me, it was clear they shifted endings to that saga midstream to the eventual reveal. As a kid, I didn't realize how blatant they were in pointing Supergirl as Censor Girl. It's quite jarring, especially when you consider the payoff. It would be interesting to read the hot takes in the future Legion letter pages on once she is revealed. And I think we've been talking about that quite a lot in these past episodes, about where we felt the storyline might have shifted away from it being Supergirl. We've read some text pages about how they did construct the story around the idea that Censor Girl is Supergirl, but obviously they had to change that and go to Plan B. So we've been kind of talking about that, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about that for the next 2-3 issues.
Mm-hmm.
And then Chris has some thoughts on the new Legion book. He says, like Peter, I am the old man kicking the kids off of the lawn. This is not my Legion. This is similar to when Marvel revealed their new Warriors team, to the absolute disapproval of the comics audience. Not being a man baby about it, but if you avoided calling the new team by the classic character names, this would not have been as polarizing out of the gate. You have a new Legion here full of new diverse characters, and you sandbag them with fan animosity even before we met them. This will be the cosplay Legion for me. I just asked the question, why is it considered high crime in DC to reboot a property and retain its original elements and history? It feels that there is a concerted effort to not give fans of a property what they want. We are dealing with a time-traveling group. We could literally meet all incarnations of the Legion, past, present, and future. So why not give us some classic team mixing with the new recruits? It's money left on the table. Long live the Legion Project podcast, Chris.
Well, that's a very interesting idea, the mixing of the various versions of them. And I keep coming back to, Peter, every time we talk about that, the new Legion book, the current Legion book, I should say, when we first talked about this, the idea when they announced it and whatnot, you made some comments about go beyond what we know, and maybe even go another 1,000 years in the future. I can't remember exactly what you said, but yeah, it surprises me that they don't, I guess, think beyond the comfortable, the known. But I mean, it is a publishing property with IP and fan service. I mean, you can't really get around that. So unfortunately, how many times do either Marvel or DC actually try something new and invest in it and help develop it before they just chuck it because the sales aren't there and they go back to the familiar? So from a business standpoint, I see why companies do that. But as a fan, yeah, I would love to see something new and different. But I don't know that if I were, if it were 15-year-old me, 20-year-old me, if I would feel the same way. I do now, of course. I don't want to keep reading the same stories and characters over and over and over.
Right. I do like that idea, the notion of mixed generations, and I feel that's something you could have done even by jumping it to the future.
Oh yeah.
Some of these characters are long-lived, or they would have had kids, or they would have,
exactly. Because then some of the characters who are, at a certain point in their lives now would take on a different role in that, in the with the future Legionnaires type thing.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm already starting to draft the story in my mind.
Let's go on here. We got an email from Mike A. And Mike says, this is about last issue number 23. A couple little snippets here from Mike's email. I was a little surprised at how violently Mon-El reacted to the prospect of going back to the Phantom Zone, but sometimes in fiction, a little over-the-topness is needed to make the scene and story more exciting. It would be pretty boring if his reaction was just moping around. Either way, the bottom panel of page 2 is great. One of my favorite panels in an issue, full of good panels. I really like the scene in the bar on Rimbor. It had that Mos Eisley cantina feel. I didn't even notice the little Easter eggs. I love and collect these kind of unofficial crossovers, such as the Rutland, Vermont Halloween Parade issues published by Marvel and DC in the early 70s, in issues of Justice League of America, Thor, and Avengers, among others. They all had the cross thread of the parade, which featured unofficial appearances by the competitor company's characters. I just recently discovered an unofficial appearance of Clark Kent and Lois Lane in Thor 341. Regarding the scene with Lightning Lass and Shrinking Violet in the Legion cruiser, I think the reason Ayla makes an out-of-character comment like, "Or am I being silly?" is because she lets her guard down when she's with Violet because of her apparent affection and doesn't mind being vulnerable around her. I know that hindsight is 20/20, but it feels like their impending relationship is pretty apparent reading it now. Levitz knew what he was doing. All in all, this has been my favorite issue so far in the Baxter run.
I think I would have to agree with that.
And there's something in this discussion that we're going to have today that I'll bring up more about the Vi Lightning Lass relationship.
Oh,
we'll
good.
Definitely talk about that.
All right, great.
Did you ever read those crossover things that he's talking about, the Rutland Parade?
I have heard about it, but no, I don't think I've ever read them specifically.
Yeah, I think I glanced through them at one point or another, or I've seen images online, certainly. And that little bit of I love when they do stuff like that. Like they did it in New Teen Titans and the DN Agents.
Yes.
Where the Titans fought a group called the Recombatants or something like that. And the DN Agents fought, I think their name was Project Youngblood. And they were clearly aping the other teams. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of like an unofficial crossover.
Well, and as I recall, it was intentional. The
Right.
Both teams on each book knew that they were doing this. So I remember at the time when those issues came out, and I did buy both of those issues where each team's analogs appeared. There was a lot of, I guess, fan outrage. How dare you copy these characters? It's so blatant, and all this stuff. And it's like, well, chill, guys. We did that on purpose. It was a nod to each other. So I thought that was really interesting.
Sell some books.
That's right.
Well, if you want to send us feedback, please do. You can email me, peter@thedailyrios.com.
And if you'd like to send it to me, you can send it to longboxreview@gmail.com.
We want to hear your thoughts about the issue. We would love to hear your thoughts about future issues, too. So if you're reading ahead in this Who is Censor Girl mystery, and you have thoughts about issues 25 and 26, send it our way, because we would love to hear your thoughts beforehand, not just afterhand. Okay. I'm done with any sort of preamble stuff. If you are, we can jump into the issue if you're ready.
I am.
All right. Hit us with the synopsis.
All right. Issue 24, Suspicion, by Paul Levitz, Greg LaRocque, and Larry Malstead. John Costanza, Carl Gafford, and Karen Berger, the usual crew, with a cover by LaRocque and Malstead. So what happens this issue? At the Legion headquarters, Censor Girl is on the minds of the Legionnaires while she listens in on their conversation. Then a new mystery emerges. Wildfire, Colossal Boy, and Polar Boy head to the Legion Academy to investigate the disappearance of Mentalla. On Rimbor, the science police have been called by the bartender from the last issue to let them know the person Violet and Lightning Lass were looking for, Javers, has been found dead. Back at Legion HQ, Brainy is restating his case to Element Lad to find out who Censor Girl is, and Element Lad comes to a fateful decision. At a club, Quizlet discovers Dream Girl dancing with someone new? And the Emerald Empress severely punishes a Kund who failed to find Validus. She's very serious about reforming the Fatal Five. So we know they are serious about this. We return to the Legion HQ where Magnetic Kid, Polar Boy, and Tellus are discussing Censor Girl. And in deep space, Shadowlass and Mon-El are spending some quality time together. Mon is still fearful that Brainy's latest cure is only temporary, and Shady tries her best to put his mind at ease. At Nullport, the science police fail to stop superpowered thief Flare from stealing the fastest starship stationed there, and Emerald Empress asks her to join the new Fatal Five. Element Lad confronts Censor Girl, wanting some assurance that eventually she can reveal herself to the team, but Censor Girl regretfully tells Element Lad that she is resigning, leaving Element Lad wondering if he's just made the worst mistake of his administration. And then finally, in this back-and-forth issue, Ultra Boy and Phantom Girl see Censor Girl leave, and Joe decides to take a peek behind the mask and discovers nothing. There's no one behind the mask.
Mm-hmm.
What a ping-pongy issue. I have trouble sometimes coming up with a synopsis that doesn't make my head hurt, going back and forth.
And we should make mention there is a backup tale, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So you'll get twice the Legion talk today.
Mm-hmm. Or, 1.3 Legion talk.
Yeah. Do you want to continue your thoughts? What did you think of said issue?
Well, it's funny how, I have my initial reaction to this was like, especially after, and it's not necessarily fair to do this, but after that previous issue, which we both loved so much, then to go to this, even though it is finally starting to really address Censor Girl and who she is, I felt it was, when I first read it, I felt it was really light on really anything. And I think that it's kind of mirrored in the constant back and forth nature of the structure of the issue. But upon rereading and taking notes on it, and this is one of the things I love about doing this show, is it's not just a quick read and I'm done, and I throw the comic back in in my comic box. It's, really looking at how it's written, what were they trying to accomplish, what are the themes, what's the characterization, all that good story stuff that I love about comics. I actually ended up enjoying certain aspects of this in relation to how the Legion are feeling about Censor Girl, and I guess basically that's it. I mean, there's some other things in some of the B stories that are going on here, the subplots that Levitz is teasing us with, but just really starting to get into the who is Censor Girl after all this time.
Right. I put it down as, and this is something that Levitz mentions in the letter column about this issue. So in like issue 30 or whatever, where he calls these vignette issues and or vignette oriented issues. And it really does feel like it's like another day in the life of the Legion, even though there's some major rumblings going on underneath.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit of the calm before the storm in my mind. And I've mentioned this now a couple times already. In my mind, I knew that this issue 24 was the start of like finishing up the Who is Censor Girl mystery. Then we go to issue 25 and 26, and really we go to 27. So I'm expecting these issues to ramp up in action. And I don't even mean just fighting. I just mean in terms of like the stakes. So I thought this one did a nice job of kind of laying everything out, especially after the little bit of the break that we got last issue. And then we also had like the Universo issue that kind of sidestepped the Who is Censor Girl mystery. And we're kind of like back into it again. And I felt the same way. I read it once and I was like, okay, let me walk away. I took a whole bunch of notes and then I walked away, read it again. And there is some meaty stuff in here that I'm excited to talk about. One of the things I have to give props to, I felt like this was the first issue where the collaboration between Levitz, LaRocque, and company, but really between Levitz and LaRocque, was super strong. And there are several art things, poses, sequential panels, some layout things that I was like, oh, this Levitz I really like. So I appreciated the art. I found myself really kind of looking at some of the artwork as well. And in a way that was like comfortable, and I was very appreciative outside of some of the stuff that we've gotten in the previous issues. So on that level, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. On that level, I was really like, oh, this is a really nice looking issue. You know, it may not be up to the level of what we wanted to continue with Lytle, but just, and I think we might have talked about this in a previous episode too, where it's like, we're out of the Lytle world anyway, you know, so as a LaRocque issue standing and just comparing LaRocque to LaRocque, this was a good issue for LaRocque.
I would agree with you. Generally speaking, I that it is indeed a good LaRocque issue. Unfortunately, having just talked about the previous issue with Lytle and how much, especially when I did what I said about how much I love the way that Lytle expresses himself on the page in different ways and panel layouts and stuff like that. This comes across as kind of good, but it's a very serviceable issue, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I have some issues with some of the art in here, but you know those are just minor quibbles. But yeah, I generally agree with you. I think this is a pretty good LaRocque issue, and I while I didn't really think of it in the terms that you just expressed, but now that you pointed it out, I think I was intuiting it, that collaboration between Levitz and LaRocque, it does feel comfortable now. and maybe that's also maybe why I'm downplaying the execution of the issue. So I'm very curious what specific things that you will bring up, and maybe that will make me look at this a little differently.
Cool. So we'll talk more about the issue. Let's talk about the covers. We have the cover to this issue, and by LaRocque, with Element Lad and other Legionnaires kind of pointing towards Sensor Girl and saying, "Your secret is out, Sensor Girl. We know who you are." And then comparing that to Tales of the Legion of Superheroes, issue number 349 by Kurt Swan, Dan Bulanati, and Anthony Tollin, which is the title of the issue, Suspicion, and a whole bunch of Legionnaires' eyes just looking down at Sensor Girl. So 2 Sensor Girl-focused covers a year apart. And what are your thoughts? Which one did you like?
Well, the main cover, issue 24 cover, it's one of those classic. They got the dialogue, the word balloons on the cover, which even by 86 we're at, those were kind of out by that point, I think. So we didn't get a lot of those, especially going forward. I know. So to see this, it kind of. It was kind of a surprise. It seemed different, right? So and I'm always a fan of having covers be basically a large panel, or a depiction of a panel in some way. But I mean, it's a total cop out. It's not. This is not what happens in the issue. So take that as you will. I know some people were in the letter column that I read. They were not happy about that. In fact, one of the letter writers complained about that cover, and Karen in the issue, or in the response, said, quote, "Its intention to be symbolic of the mystery was obviously misleading." Which I just thought that was really funny.
Yeah, she stood up and took the hit for that.
Yeah. But construction wise, like you said, it's a very Sensor Girl centric cover with her just standing there. She seems very angry on the cover, very tense and angry. It could be just the accusation. It could be everything surrounding it. I especially love the reactions of the characters behind Element Lad. You got Timberwolf, Brainiac 5, and Chameleon Boy there, and given how the issue opens on the very first page, the fact that Timberwolf is there with that weird kind of, I don't know, it's like he's giving her the stink eye kind of expression. It makes total sense. But the other two, I don't get that reaction whatsoever. I know this is just a means to express, as Karen said, it's symbolic of the story, the overall approach. And all these characters have something to say about this mystery about Sensor Girl in the issue, so it makes sense they're on there. So it's a very impressive cover. If this were new on the shelf of a comic shop and I walked in and I would see this, I'd go, wow, I got to read that. I got to read that comic. So they did a good job there, especially with how prominent she is. Oh yeah, the red and white costume with all that yellow with a blue background. It's very striking, especially in terms of the color.
And for as much as I love to back issue bin dive and constantly looking at cover galleries and things like that, the Tales cover, researching this issue and looking up, I don't own that issue. That might be the first time I've ever seen that cover. Because I looked at it and went, wow, I don't remember that at all. And it's another image of just Sensor Girl by herself. Considering how the Tales run at this point had to be low in its circulation, I imagine, because that series is about to be discontinued in another half a year or whatever. I wonder if the reason why I've never seen that issue is just because, number one, it's a low print run. Number two, people picked it up because it's like, ooh, Sensor Girl. She doesn't get many covers, especially during this time of her mystery. So I I kind of like both. I wish the Tales cover was a little more organized, I guess, which is so weird because I usually like messy things. But there's something about that one that I really like. And I do like the Baxter one. The angle throws me off a tiny bit. Again, I don't know why. It kind of like I should really love that cover. But I'm kind of like, they both speak to me in different ways. And maybe this is another round where if there was a third option, I probably would love the third option, you know. But as far as these two go, there's something that I really like about the Tales cover. And everything you said about the Baxter thing, you know, I'm right there. It's Grand Legion tradition to be over the top on a cover like that, you know. But the Tales cover with all the eyes and trying to figure out who belongs to which set of eyes, and for it to be a standalone, like I want that issue. I mean, I want that issue anyway because it's a hole in my collection, but I want that issue.
It's interesting you say that because I feel very similarly between these two covers. Normally, when we're talking about the two different covers of these stories, I tend to gravitate towards the Baxter book and not the Tales book. But this one, I had a really hard time, and in fact, actually in my notes I have that I prefer the Tales cover just a little bit more.
Mm.
And it's not necessarily for the art itself, because you know it's Kurt Swan, but what'd you say, Dan Bulanati,
mm-hmm.
which just goes to show you how much an inker, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I have some thoughts about the backup tale in this issue regarding the inker, what the inker brings to the storytelling, to the imagery, because looking at this, I would not have guessed this as necessarily at first glance that this is a Kurt Swan drawn cover. So that aside, though, like you, I really like all those eyes surrounding her, you know, gazing upon her, trying to see through her, beyond her. You know, so it plays to the whole idea of her being censor girl, and the eyes are the window to the soul, and how fractured it looks. It's like either a broken mirror or like a crystal, a multifaceted crystal where you're seeing all these different images all at once. And you know, just that whole idea of what we're seeing and how we're seeing it, and it's not uniform in any way. I really dig that construction. Now, I think here I go again, making comments about Kurt Swan. If some other artist had done this, maybe it would be a little more, I don't know, have a bit more to it, or a bit more power to it, or I'd have a stronger reaction maybe. But I really like the construction of that cover, if I don't necessarily like the execution of the art. Does that make sense?
Oh, sure. Plus, like, you got the red and the yellow in the Legion logo, but then you also have the red and the yellow in the Suspicion title down below. It's a nice little bit of framework there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's good.
The way that the cape off a Censor Girl, the way that curves and flows, I just really like it. There's something, you know, I made some disparaging comments about Kurt Swan, but at the same time, you know, he is doing a nice job at conveying lines in various ways on this cover. So yeah.
Right. And you know, a character that has a cape, come on, says a lot. Okay, good. Interesting thoughts about the cover there. All right, so let's get into it. Let's get into this story. Censor Girl. Who is Censor Girl? I think the biggest takeaway that I took from this issue in that regard, with that particular story, is a kind of, it's almost like it's going up against what I remember about reading this when I was a kid, and realizing that the mystery of who is Censor Girl is more character driven than what I remember. And And I think that speaks to like what you said about your first read of it being kind of light. Because I read it and I thought, okay, I expected more, I expected more confrontation or a reason for them to be suspicious.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Well, yeah.
And
What about current events in their lives is prompting them to be so vocal and adamant about her as compared to previous issues where it was just like, well, who is she? And we're suspicious about her powers, or at least, Timberwolf is. And so, yeah, what's the impetus here for this sudden intense scrutiny?
And part of it is I feel like the mix of the new Fatal Five trying to form, that could be part of it, like maybe because it's an echo of that previous issue where they went up against Emerald Empress and Persuader, and along came Censor Girl, and the Legionnaires heard the Empress give Censor Girl an invitation, and maybe that's the drive. And there's some of that in this, but I don't think it's as connected narratively as maybe I wanted to be. But I did walk away and think, all right, this isn't a strange story for the Legion. They've had these things before where there's been a mystery character. It's usually in the Silver Age, so the story is all very, silly, and the outcome is wrapped up in 18 pages. So you have this mystery. It's nagging at some of the characters in different ways. Sometimes it's just gossip, like the first couple pages. Sometimes it brings a little bit more of a microscope to the Legion and to the perception of what the Legion is. And I consider that sort of like the Magnetic Kid Tellus story. And then it goes the other way of just being sheer confrontation, like between Brainiac 5 and Chameleon Boy. And ultimately, it falls into Element Lad's lap. And I love this larger discussion that we have every now and then about Element Lad's leadership, because I think that comes into play here too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's using the Who is Censor Girl mystery to talk about these other things, or to allow these other elements of the Legion to play through. And I agree that by the end, I was like, okay, this feels like the introduction to the main story, which we'll get next issue, but it still will allow me to talk about some other things, which I'm always thankful for. So that was a big takeaway. Who is Censor Girl is not necessarily like the Tara Markov story in New Teen Titans, where she is firmly a plant in the group, and she is there absolutely to create sort of like discord and trying to upset what the team is. That's not what this is. That's not what this is, and yet it's still happening. And I guess if you had to like tell somebody what is the mystery of Censor Girl, well, it's like, well, it's just sort of like everybody's just uneasy. They're just uneasy. And there's no way to kind of grasp an issue number, or like, oh, in this issue, this happens. Or in this issue, they get suspicious because of what she does here. I mean, there's a few things like that, but I guess that's the main takeaway. It's hard to kind of like define what this mystery is, because it's not the traditional mystery.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you bring up a very good point. It's because it's not that traditional aspect, especially I hadn't really thought about how there are similarities between this and the Tara Markov mystery in New Teen Titans, which really wasn't a mystery. It was to the characters, but it wasn't to us, the readers. And obviously for this one, it is. But all we've gotten really so far, as I recall, are just some speculation on some Legionnaires' parts that has been, at least for a couple, I'm thinking of Timberwolf and Shrinking Violet specifically, where the speculation is now turned into suspicion. And we've even gotten that before this issue. So it's been so, I guess, small in scope, so subtle, that maybe that's what I'm reacting to in terms of the, I guess, the weight of the mystery not really being here, or the importance of it not really being in the issue, and or in the build up to this point. And then suddenly it's just like boiled over, where now it's a big deal, and wait, why? So, but the clues, pardon me, the clues were there. I mean, we have seen a little bit of that building up. It's just, I guess, maybe because of the way that previous issues have focused on other things, and so it's been maybe 2 or 3 issues since someone's made a comment about Censor Girl, and so it makes it feel very disjointed in terms of the overall effect ever since she joined the team. It also doesn't help that we haven't really gotten a whole lot of actual interaction with her and other Legionnaires, and and part of that is the way that you construct the mystery, so as not to overtip your hand. But she's also been shown to be a loner, and we actually get a panel in here where she's sitting in her room, presumably by herself. She's listening in on the conversation in some way, but she's kept herself detached, and that's part of the problem. So that works from that perspective.
And this has been going on since issue 14,
Mm-hmm.
so it is 10 issues so far of who is this character, whether it was thrown in our face or not. Conversations between the other 4 new recruits about her power set. And then there's the added thing of, is it her fault? Like, I think that's what Element Lad is struggling with, right? Like, he's like, I'm fine with this, but the team isn't. And now it's starting to boil over, as you said, and cause problems within the workspace. And it's not her fault. Or is it her fault? And some of it may have to do with the notion that they thought it was going to be Supergirl. So the motivations might have changed, or I should say the motivations have changed since they've dropped Supergirl being the identity, which had to have happened now probably 4 or 5 issues ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, well, now you got to come up with a new idea of, why is she masked? What is she waiting for? What is she doing? We're not going to get that answer for a number of issues, but it kind of puts the mystery around her, and it kind of makes it a little more like I'm a little bit on her side in this issue.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah, my opening note on this issue, Peter, was, well, one, I think we're way past the suspicion stage. By
the way, we should probably have had a drinking game, because not only is it called Suspicion, but they use the word suspicion, and then we're probably going to say it a lot.
Yeah, that's
true.
I'd
be drunk by the end of the episode.
What makes you think I'm not already? So we're way past the suspicion stage, but some of the team members they're just being asses, and which is not out of what am I trying to say here? Out of bounds for the Legion, because we've talked about those early Legion stories where they're just jerks to each other, and while they're not, maybe Timberwolf a little bit, but they're not being overtly jerky, but it's certainly calling back to their roots of being just dumb teenagers.
And that's something that I've seen throughout this run, too. Like, Ultra Boy straight up looking at her mask.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, many other, well, I shouldn't say many. Some of these Legionnaires come across as just, well, let me express it this way. I don't like them anymore for what they did, or at least this issue. Timberwolf, well, that really has more to do with the backup story, but he's been, like I said, he opens the issue with him talking to Block, and he's still talking about how, because he did this before in a previous issue, how he doesn't believe one person could really do all those stunts that Censor Girl does, so he keeps hammering that point. And then Shrinking Violet, chimes in because she's nearby. She's a menace. How? What has Censor Girl done that would cause Shrinking Violet to make that accusation, other than the fact that they don't know her, so therefore she must not be good. She must be a threat in some way, and then that spills over into the conversation between Brainiac 5, Chameleon Boy, and Element Lad later. So I do like the way that Levitz and company are constructing this overall conversation between the Legionnaires, but as a fan of the characters, I'm looking at this going, you guys are just you're talking behind her back, you're making what seem like unfounded accusations, and they just do not come across well in this story, which is really interesting.
I do love how Shrinking Violet later, she's like, I have no reason to suspect Censor Girl, but who knows? That's my point. And you're like, oh, well, okay, then. I mean, it's Shrinking Violet. She's going through a lot anyway. But they all, Brainiac 5 went into her room in whatever issue that was.
That like violation. Yes.
Yeah, and they're all kind of, Ultra Boy. All this gossip's getting me interested and hungry too. And
oh, geez.
And Sun Boy's like, you're one of a kind, Ultra Boy. Like, they're just talking about the serious thing, but then they're all like, it's like a bunch of Kardashians gossiping, like they're almost at the point
oh God,
of saying something interesting, or you're like, you think they're going to hit on the point, or they're going to hit on something, like maybe they're going to all go into Element Lad and say, but then they're all like, oh, by the way, I'm hungry, and then they're like, let's play chess, and Sun Boy's like, oh, Ultra Boy, you're a cad, like that Legion elitism is on display in those first two pages, that's which true. I love.
Yeah,
like you say, you sort of don't like them for it, but then you realize that's the point, that there is this sort of elitism, and that's the whole reason why they're trying to inspect her in the first place. That's where the suspicion lies. It's like, how dare someone be on our team and we don't know who she is?
Oh, yes. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that elitism, that's the perfect word in this situation.
And maybe I'm being hard on them, but...
I think they deserve it, though.
Yeah. Like 14, 15-year-old me would probably be right in line with them. But that's the point. I'm not their age. And like, if we jump to I really liked the scene with Tellus, Polar Boy, and Magnetic Kid about this, because they even echo some of that, where they're like, where Magnetic Kid says, well, the older, I overheard the older Legionnaires, right? Like, he specifically says older Legionnaires. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's not just about experience. It's also about, there is a definite age gap. Half of the older Legionnaires were trying to figure out over lunch. Nobody has any new ideas, at least not that they said out loud.
Yeah.
Part of me feels like that's Levitt saying, okay, readers, you're coming up with some wild guesses, but everybody is just guessing what everybody else is guessing, saying it's Saturn Girl, saying it's Saturn Queen. Nobody's, or maybe people are still saying it's Supergirl, But I liked a little bit of divide, the generational divide, that aspect provided. As I said earlier, the mystery is helping us to kind of get into the Legion dynamics.
Well, and you brought up that scene between those three characters. I just noticed here, Tellus makes a comment. Magnetic Kid responds kind of maybe angrily, because it's. I think what Tellus is getting at is not how Magnetic Kid takes it, but he takes it as kind of a personal affront.
That's because Magnetic Kid's a nerd.
Yeah, well, and he's the new kid, and he's the legacy, kind of thing.
Right.
But Polar Boy's like, let's not let this get too personal, okay? And I'm like, why didn't you say that before in the lunchroom?
The other thing I like about that sequence with Magnetic Kid and Polar Boy, I think I think this is where you're like, Tellus is right to bring up Cosmic Boy after the way Magnetic Kid talked about Saturn Girl. Like, I think, like you said, he's not bringing it up in the way that Magnetic Kid takes it, because Tellus is like Block, right? Like they just say things.
Mm-hmm.
They're very good at just sort of saying matter of fact things because
innocent, coming from either ignorance or innocence.
Yeah, because they don't have any ulterior motive. They're just taking the comments as they go, you know. And Magnetic Kid's response, he's like, "Well, Cosmic Boy knows that I'm here," and I almost felt like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What is that? Because you've outed? We know who you are. We don't know who. Like that. There again is sort of like it's like almost like discrimination or something like that. Like, well, I have no secrets to hide. And it's like, yeah, well, that's because you're vanilla milk toast. You know, like there's nothing interesting about you right now. Yeah. And are you annoyed that people are they don't even pay attention to you because you're just Cosmic Boy light? I'm totally reading into it.
But that's how I read it too. He's like I said, he's kind of the legacy character, and he has things to prove, and he was against such a legendary member of the Legion. So yeah, I that's totally how I read into what his reaction was, or why he was reacting that way.
Oh yeah, and then he says, okay. He knows that I'm here. Thinks Saturn Girl could have that much faith in a stranger? He almost hits it. He almost hits the reveal in a weird way. But then it does call into question what he's saying about Saturn Girl, which he's totally just being reactionary as well. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, and the way that he introduced the idea just a few panels before, I think she's really Saturn Girl sneaking back in. You know, yeah. It's like, you know, is I don't know. To me, it kind of comes across as, well, he's the kid brother of the Legion founder, and so somehow his guess has some sort of import, or I don't. It's like he's trying to be more or show more of what he is or can do than actually he's capable of.
Yeah, I don't like him.
Yeah. See this whole issue. Don't like him. Don't like her.
All Sensor Girl's fault.
Yeah, that's true. Now you, Peter, you touched on Element Lad a little bit before, and how he's dealing with this, and that's one of the things I really liked about this issue. Certainly, was and you know, coming from my accusation of the issue where the Legionnaires are being jerks, he is, you know, showing to be level-headed. He's thinking as a manager would, trying to deal with all these disparate personalities, and realizing, oh, this is an issue with too many people now. I have to deal with it. And he does the uncomfortable thing. He goes and talks to the person that everyone's talking about, and saying, what assurances can you give me? Can you give me something? Let me help you, so that he can smooth this over and not have this issue festering under the surface for his teammates. I just thought that was a really cool thing that they showed about Element Lad, especially considering that in previous issues so far, he has expressed his own self-doubts and questioning his own abilities to be an effective team leader. So at least with interpersonal issues, he seems to be doing a good job, even if he's not successful in the way that he wanted to be.
Let's go back to the Brainiac Chameleon Boy scene, because I think that's, you know, that first time we sort of it sort of hits Element Lad, and then we'll jump back to that scene that you're talking about, because, you know, the larger notion of Element Lad leadership is really on display in this volume of Legion stories, unfairly so, I think, because as I think I mentioned one time before, these books are created at a time where Levitz is paying attention to that kind of thing, right? The leadership of Element Lad. If this was 10, 15 years ago, you wouldn't care. It's just Wildfire being leader and he's yelling at everybody, right? Like that's about as far depth as it goes.
Yeah.
But in this one, it has been a recurring thing, whether it's because of Element Lad's relationship with Siobhan Aaron developing, because of their close working relationship. Several instances where like Dream Girl has said some things, and like you said in that later scene where he's doubting himself, and like this this is the story that kind of puts a nail in Element Lad's leadership coffin. Like, this is it. This is like the thing I think that kind of gives him the boot later on. But when we get that scene between Brainiac 5 and Chameleon Boy, that's where I wrote in my notes, see, this is exactly what's going on. She's affecting the team. Her very presence is affecting the team, not on missions, but just in their sort of personalities. Mm-hmm. You sort of expect it with Brainiac 5, as these characters already say. We've already seen it, right? We've already seen Brainiac 5 go through a spiral in past issues. So that's a no-brainer. But as Element Lad says, to get Chameleon Boy to be that confrontational is a little out of character, but it just goes to show the severity of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I would absolutely be really disappointed if some of the aftermath is like, oh, the whole reason everybody's on edge is because Sensor Girl's powers were leaking to everybody. Like, that would kind of, oh no, that's not fun. Like, I want this to really be their decisions.
Yeah.
And the way he handles it, Element Lad, because I think, again, he's right. He's right that they should all respect her privacy. He's also right when he says this isn't fair. Whereas, like, does he say it about himself? Let me see where he's. Let's say, I don't care who she is. I'm sure Saturn Girl made a good choice, but the suspicions are driving the entire Legion mad. It's not a matter of privacy anymore. No choice. It's not fair. And like, what does he mean? It's not fair. It's not fair that he has to invade her privacy. It's not fair that he has to take charge. Is he saying it's not fair that he has to handle it? That it happens under his leadership? I don't know. It probably means all those things. Mm-hmm. But
yeah,
I was like, yeah, I feel bad for the dude, but this is why you're leader. You either handle it or you don't.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of sympathy for him in this situation because I've had, while I've not had to deal with a masked member of my team at work, I have had to deal with some individuals that were causing issues among the larger group, and it is uncomfortable, and I will admit, I kind of felt like Element Lad is expressing himself here. It's like, why do I have to deal with this crap?
And the way he handles it when he does finally talk to her is like, I think is right, mm-hmm. But I also think her reaction is right too. Like, I don't fault her for her reaction of going, all right, fine. You know what? Okay. I think it's best if I left, because she's dealing with stuff that we don't know.
Right.
And it's a little, you do want to sort of shake her and go, okay, you got to own up to some of this, right? But she's not ready for that yet, for whatever reason. And maybe that's part of the story that'll play out in the next couple issues. But I also really like some of the artwork on those pages, like the 5 panels of Element Lad talking, mm-hmm. and all the different looks on his face. It's almost very Kevin Maguire-ish, like later issues of Kevin Maguire.
Yeah, it's very expressive.
Yeah. But also the way, like, she's sitting way upright. She's not leaning back. When she walks away, the cape doesn't have like, it doesn't delineate where the folds are in her cape. It's sort of like a solid color. Mm. The panel where she says, I thank you for your honesty and your support. I've come to a new respect for you. And she's sort of just like half looking as she's turned away. Like, it's good. I applaud LaRocque and company for the emotional weight that is showing up in the pages here. And I like the notion of what she says. Like, I've come to a new respect. It almost feels like, oh, does she know Element Lad? Is she just saying that? Like, that's interesting. Is that a clue? So, and then Element Lad saying, I may have set a new record for stupidity for a Legion leader.
Well, yeah, his comment about things not being fair, I think, given how some Legionnaires may look on this situation for the during the next Legion election, yeah, I think maybe he would be unfairly judged for the situation and the Legionnaires not knowing how he's been dealing with it with the particular individuals. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see, because I have no idea who follows Element Lad as leader, or even when this occurs. So,
oh, good. Well, I hope you don't accidentally find out, because it'll be fun to see. Mm-hmm. So, I think I might have to put a pin in this one note where I kind of said this already. What is making Sensor Girl keep her identity a secret? What's going on with her? And outside of what we already know, is there? I'm forgetting if there's what else there is to it, and so I'm going to put a pin in that and maybe come back to it in the next couple issues to see if she does give a little bit more of a reason behind all of this, which I have to imagine she does.
Well, I certainly hope the payoff is good enough for us readers.
It's brilliant. No, I better not hype it up that much just in case. What else do you have about the Sensor Girl part of this issue?
I think maybe that's about it. Yeah, the rest of my notes are about the other things in the issue.
Let me look through here. I have a couple of things. So you mentioned Timberwolf saying, I don't believe one person can really do all those stunts, and yet we have characters who have, Superboy could, Starboy at one point could do a whole bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. Wildfire could do a whole bunch of stuff. Now they all lost those abilities except for Superboy, Mon-El, Ultra. They all, Superboy and Mon-El can do a whole bunch of stuff, so why can't Sensor Girl?
Yeah, exactly. His logic is not sound.
It's Timberwolf. I didn't think Timberwolf was being as nerdy about it as some of the other characters were. Mm-hmm. Like even though it does open with him, I think he would be one that would make those claims, but would never confront her.
Oh yeah.
Whereas someone like Wildfire might do that, or Shrinking Violet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's like the guy who has this one bug up his butt about something and is constantly talking about it, but then never does anything about it.
Well, par for the course, right? As we'll get to later. And then Shrinking Violet bringing up Saturn Queen, like you said. And I think at this point, she was in the first 5 issues, right?
Saturn Queen?
Yeah. With the Legion of Supervillains? I think she was, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Been so long. I know. Because I thought I read somewhere that she had never really gone up against the Legion. But regardless, them bringing up this notion again, it's now the third time that they've brought up this idea of, second or third time, those 3 characters, Lightning Lord, Cosmic King, and Saturn Queen, are supposed to be from the Legion's future.
You're right. Yeah. Timberwolf says that specifically. So I thought that was a nice little thing, especially since you talked a bit about that. I don't remember what episode that was now, or what issue where you brought that up. But yeah,
it's like number 4 or something, like 4 or 5. Yeah. It's like Levitt's debunking that whole notion. Mm-hmm. And maybe she is from the future, but maybe she isn't. Like he's trying to go, okay, those were part of the adult Legion stories. I got to get him into the present Legion stories. So I don't know if it means anything, but I took notion of that. Just trying to see if there's anything else Sensor Girl related. And then the only other thing I really have is about Joe looking into her mask and saying there's nothing there. And what does that imply, short of giving a theory which might spoil the next issue? So,
well, and it's interesting that he says specifically Sensor Girl's costume was empty, which implies that the costume is there is a costume, but it's not filled with something, right? Which that seems that's a very interesting distinction.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious now what comes next in terms of how this fits into that, because the obvious reason for that would not make sense. His comment would not make sense, and I know I'm talking around the thing, but I don't want to. We don't want to spoil it or jump ahead. So
I know we've gone this far without saying it.
So yeah, well, I think this is a pin to come back to, but I kind of suspect that this will be something that is just kind of lost in the details.
That's interesting, though. I never thought of it that way. It's almost like it's Doctor Strange's cape from the MCU universe.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, it's like a living entity. So, okay, yeah, that's the Censor Girl part of the story, which is obviously a major part to it and will play out, as I said, in the next 2-3 issues. The reveal will happen next issue. Did you know that? Did you know the reveal is next issue? Did I spoil that for you?
Well, the way you were talking, I thought it was maybe in the next couple issues.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
Well, that's great, though.
I think the next issue's cover will give it away, too.
So. Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
Not the identity, but that,
Well, considering, though, that they claim that they were, or implied heavily they were going to reveal who she was in this issue, you can't trust those covers.
All right. So what else about this issue? What do you want to talk? We have several subplots and small little vignettes here and there. What do you want to hit on next?
Should we talk about the Emerald Empress and Fatal 5 stuff? Because a lot of the vignettes really revolve around that.
Right. It's kind of like the second. It's like a plot A.2.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
So I guess the first thing about that is the missing Legion Academy member, which there is a potential error in here.
Oh, so absolutely.
Okay.
Error.
Okay. I didn't know. Are you, Peter? Are you reading the actual issues? Are you reading them digitally or from some sort of collection or anything?
No, I have the issues.
Okay. So I wondered if maybe they corrected that in some later version of this, but because Wildfire, Colossal Boy, and Polar Boy are heading to the Legion Academy because someone's missing. It turns out to be Mentalla, but there's a Polar Boy makes the comment about, we only know Censor Girl's missing. But that's clearly not the case, because we just saw her sitting presumably nearby where the Legionnaires were talking about them. And then there's a later scene here where Element Lad calls her to talk to her, and then we see her with him. So that totally just a continuity error, I guess.
Well, it's bad because they just had this conversation about Censor Girl, who is she, blah, blah, blah. And then you read the dialogue, and it could have been that. Mm. It could have been that, oh, my God, she went missing.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
she heard them. So it's a boner of an error because it's like, no, they're trying to set up Mentalla leaving the academy against the backdrop of the recruitment drive of the Fatal Five. Mm-hmm. Like that's big news. Mm-hmm. The Empress already tried to recruit Censor Girl, and now we have Mentalla going away, and we only met her that one time during issue 14. So for that to be such an error, it almost, as I read it this time, I was like, wait, what? Like, because that could have happened, but that's not what happened. It's a mistake, and it's an unfortunate mistake because it could have been real.
Well, and maybe that's what it is that's exactly what Levitz was going to do in some early draft of this, and somehow that made it into the lettering of the issue. I don't know.
Oh.
Who knows? But there really, I mean, the thrust of this 2 or 3 page scene is basically getting to know that Mentalla left, and Wildfire suspects that has something to do with the new Fatal Five that the Emerald Empress is putting together. But really, what we get here is we see the new Karate Kid after 10 issues? We saw him last?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, and so he's training. then we see a bunch of other Legion Academy members, which I thought was interesting. Because the Legion Academy before now, generally speaking, it's always been composed of the same, 4, 5, 6 members that we always see. Lamprey, Power Boy, who else?
Comet Queen, Nightwind, Crystal Kid.
Exactly. But we don't see them. These are new folks, which is interesting. So that's cool that they, it's just a little detail. We see a bunch of potential new Legionnaire members, and it just for me, it really makes the Legion world a little more rich, because why would they only have the same 5 or 6 people in the academy that we've seen year after year after year? This makes a lot more sense to me, that certain members, certain potential candidates would come into the academy and they would wash out, and they would just disappear, and others would keep at it, like Power Boy, because he made some comment about in the past, someone made a comment about him. I can't remember now. But, being tenacious about trying to join the Legion. So I really like that scene for that. I'm less concerned about the fact that Mentalla is gone. It's just, it is what it is. She's gone, and maybe she's part of the Fatal Five. Maybe she's not. We don't know. But this scene to me is really just more about, hey, Karate Kid's still here. Remember him? And like I said, building up that world.
Yeah, and I love the Academy, so I love that they go back.
Yeah.
And, I love that Polar Boy sort of takes notice of it, and he mentions it in the later scene too, where he's like, if the Academy been around when the Substitute Heroes was around, maybe I could have done all this differently. And I think a reader pointed out that the Academy had been around to some degree at that point, but I actually, when he's talking to Mig, and he says, a word of advice, youngster, if you want to join the Legion, do it their way, period. But that's not how Polar Boy got into the Legion. Like we pointed it out, that he blustered his way in.
Yeah.
Where he's
demanded.
He's like, I don't care how old I am. I don't care what your rules are. Here I am, new costume, new sass. Put me on the team.
That was pretty much it.
Right.
I mean,
they did.
They changed the Constitution for him.
So I thought that was a little strange that he said that, because that's not the way he did it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like I think the notion of why these characters are different too is because like these new Academy members are the ones done by, I assume, LaRoque. Right? Like a lot of the background stuff in some of the other scenes too, sometimes his background characters are really great. They feel like they're right into the future. Their costuming, whatever, all of it just feels good. Other times it's like, woo, that's super generic. and we gave props to Lytle because he was such a master of the background stuff. And I think LaRoque is doing it. I think he's getting there. There's actually a point that I want to make in the one bar scene about it. But there's a couple, there are some things I like about it too, art wise. Like I like the first panel of Wildfire flying towards us.
Yep.
And then down below, Polar Boy, like the side of him, like that's good artwork. Like that's, I think that's good LaRoque artwork. The figures are going out of the panel a little bit. It even makes sense that they would be flying from their headquarters to Montauk Point. Like it shouldn't be that long of a trip. It's just going from what I assume is like Manhattan to Long Island, right? Like just, but by way of flight ring. So you just zoom right over. I really dug that. I wrote down, can we just talk about a little bit the ridiculousness of Bouncing Boy being the trainer of the Academy? I mean, I know we've seen him a bunch of times. It's wonderful. That's just so bizarre and just so like of all the people. I guess it makes sense with his personality because he's kind of level-headed.
Yeah, because we don't have any details about this, and I don't even remember when he became the Legion Academy leader, I guess, administrator. I'm not quite sure what he does there, but he seems to be the Ursat's leader of the academy, the headmaster, if you will. But yeah, you're right. He is level-headed and he has the experience. And I guess if you extrapolate this out, one of the most ridiculous Legion members was on the team. I mean, he made the big leagues, and now he's helping the minors to try and get to the big leagues. I that has a nice sense of poetry to me that I really like.
Yeah, I mean, he was there the very first Legion book I ever read, issue 304. Him and Duo Damsel teaching the recruits, teaching the academy. So I guess that's why it always sticks out to me.
It makes you wonder if after they were booted from the Legion because they got married, but they want keep the characters around some way. Well, I could just see them going, well, even though we can't be direct members of the team, is there something that we could do? And so I have this vision of them talking to the Legion or the Legion leadership and going, hey, what can we do this? Can we do that? Hey, would you guys like to run the Legion Academy? Oh, sure. Why not?
And then before we get to like Emerald Empress, just to follow up on Polar Boy a little bit, when he's talking to Magnetic Kid and Tellus, he says, I just wondered what you thought of this dialogue, if it stuck out to you. Again, he's talking about the Academy. I would have made it into the real Legion a lot faster. I thought,
what?
Oh,
yeah.
What does that say about the subs? I mean, the emphasis is mine, but still, real Legion. He's still got a kind of like a little bit of thing about that.
Oh, yeah. And given the expression on his face, I'm not quite sure how to read that. I don't know. That's a very weird juxtaposition between the words and the picture here, and trying to discern what's going on in his head. Huh.
And poor fans of the subs still getting beat over the head.
That's right. From the former leader of the team too. It's like, right. Whoa, boy, you really didn't think much of your teammates, did you?
Well, then we get those couple pages with the Emerald Empress. Again, beautiful artwork. I love the way she's just sitting there with that crystal.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just really great. And even Persuader sort of leaning up against the wall, and just some nice, comfortable panels here. But I think the largest takeaway of this recruitment drive, or at least from these two pages, a very simple motivation where she just says, I must have slaves to worship me, to do my will. We shall have a new Fatal Five to satisfy my desires. It's not a grand motivation like stealing a planet and going into another universe like the first 5 issues of the series. But okay, does that feel right? Does that feel like what Emerald Empress would use the Fatal Five for?
I guess. It just seems like there's much better ways to get what she wants without doing what she's doing, or doing it in the way that she's doing it. It seems like just an excuse to get a new Fatal Five into the book, as opposed to true character motivations. But yeah, it really depends on how this plays out. I have a hard time understanding why she's doing this, or why she's doing it in the way that she's doing it.
And does it have any counterpart or counterpoint to the way Sensor Girl is acting?
Mm-hmm.
As we sort of brought up their duality in an earlier issue. Because one is an Empress and the other one is, Sensor Girl. Just to be coy about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you trying to make some sort of connection between the two characters that's beyond what we've already seen, I guess?
I think I'm trying to make the connection now, reading it as the age I am now, as opposed to when I was a kid, because of that scene a couple issues ago where Empress is like, look, you should join me, almost to the point where she's like, we share something, like the way she talked to her and the way she confronted her. And I don't know if this is what Levitz is doing, and I'm just going to wait to write it out for the next couple issues. But I think there's something interesting between the two characters. One is in complete secrecy and we don't have any motivation to her, and the other one is very openly trying to form a team because she just wants what she wants. And I'm putting some stuff in hindsight onto this, I guess, but I don't know. I'm just sort of toying with this notion of the two of them being who they are, what they represent.
Well, okay. Speaking of that, now that you got me thinking about it, it's very interesting, given that previous issue scene that you referenced, and this scene with Persuader and her expressing her motivations for reforming the team. I have to have people worshiping me to do my will, right? But yet, the interaction between Emerald Empress and Censor Girl in that previous issue was almost a peer-to-peer relationship. Like Empress, and we already talked about this a little bit, like Empress sensed something in Censor Girl that had her on a very similar standpoint as Empress herself. And yet what she wants are lackeys, people to do her bidding. Persuader is very assumably okay in doing that. So yeah, that if what she wants are a bunch of lackeys to do her bidding, why is she toying with Censor Girl? Why is she trying to convince her to convince her to come onto the team? That, boy, now I really want that to play out. So if I don't get that, Peter, I'm going to be really ticked.
Well, I think some of it, too, had to just do with the fact that she was recruiting, right? And she just sort of sensed Censor Girl and was like, ooh, not only could I recruit, but I could recruit somebody from the Legion, and I'm sure she knows that if she tries to do anything, the Legion is going to be there. So it always goes back to the Legion one way or the other.
Oh, okay. So do you think then it's really just a matter of this is an opportunity rather than some sort of personality similarity?
Oh, no, I think that's there too.
Okay.
I do. I think she does sense something, or maybe she knows something. I don't know. I forget how this story plays out. It just was just me sort of riffing the idea of these two characters.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'd love to see how this plays out.
And I also feel like she's very consciously, or it's Paul Levitz, recruiting female characters.
Oh yes.
Because she's writing off everybody. She's like, all right, we couldn't find Validus. And not only is Validus mentioned in this scene, but it's actually in the scene with Element Lad and Brainiac 5 and Chameleon Boy. It's like on the Interlac screen, something about Validus is still missing. And she rags on her other members where she's like, Tharok is missing, Mano, blah, and we get the scene where she recruits Flair, a new character, Flair, a new criminal, right? Like I assume a Greg LaRocque designed female villain. First of all, a black female villain, right? Like, hello, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we haven't seen Invisible Kid in a long time, So she's consciously recruiting, at least what we see here, female characters. And then there's the threat of Mentalla. Where did she go? So I don't know. I just thought maybe it spoke to Emerald Empress a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you extrapolate what is implied in this issue regarding the Fatal Five, where you obviously have Empress, she recruits Flair, it's maybe Mentalla, maybe also Censor Girl. You've got, so that's 1, 2, 3, Who am I missing here? Anyway, you have a very woman-centric Fatal Five in that case. So that would have been interesting. instead of her Empress being the only female on the Fatal Five, as she has been all these years. So with that gender reversal in the team makeup, I thought that would have been interesting.
Yeah, and when Flair was stealing the ship, I mean, it was sort of kind of like Emerald Empress is going to recruit this character just because she stole a ship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess that's Paul Levitt. He just needs to introduce her. And,
a new character.
Whatever. But we get Gigi, which is fun for a little bit for me. And then we also get the Null Port. We get the shipbuilding place with the Centaur character, which I love.
Uh-huh.
I love that his name sounds like a horse sound. Or whatever. Brilliant.
Oh my God, I love that you did that.
It's cool. It's just like that was one of the lighter vignettes.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really doesn't mean much other than, okay, I got to get this character over to the Fatal Five.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the design of Flair, so I look forward to seeing more of her.
Well, yeah, she's introduced and she's this what looks like a red-skinned character with this yellow suit, right? And then a page later, we actually see, like you said, she's black, and so I love that they're playing around with how the powers manifest with her character. So that's really neat. I want to jump back to something that you mentioned since we're talking about the Fatal Five. I found this interesting. Empress says, like you said, she's talking about her former teammates who are missing or gone, whatever, and she says, "And Mano, ugh." And so I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on there? And so I actually went back to the first appearance of the Fatal Five to see if there's anything to her reacting to Mano that way.
Mm-hmm.
And there actually was a scene in that. Hold on, let me look at my notes, make sure I'm talking about the right issue here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in Adventure Comics 353, there's a scene where Mano goes to her, independent of everybody else, and tries to convince her to join him, and the two of them would go off and take over the universe. I think he actually said that specifically. And she refuses because, I think she sees him as beneath her. And he basically, it's, the way that it's portrayed in that Silver Age issue and the way that I read it now, wow. Because basically he just says, well, I'm just going to have to convince you. And he's taking off his glove to, I'm not sure to do what, but, because his hand is the thing that can disintegrate things. That, I'm not quite sure how to express it. Things could have been portrayed very differently and very wrong, given a modern sensibility, or I don't know. Maybe I'm just really reaching for this, but I did not like the way that particular scene was presented through these modern eyes. So
he's a creep.
Yeah, well, definitely a creep. But man, so anyway, I can totally understand.
I mean, his name is Mano, right?
Well, yeah.
His whole notion is about hand. My hand is going to touch you.
Yeah, exactly. And so I see, I can see why she would have that reaction to the. I mean, plus he comes from a planet that's perpetual darkness. I think that darkness was in part because of the pollution on the planet, and that's why he wears the helmet. I don't remember the details now, but that's also what And then I thought, but because we talked about this in one of the Tales episodes about the Justice League versus the Fatal Five movie, where those two are actually lovers. And I thought, well, that's a complete reversal of how the characters are, or at least how she feels about him in the book here. So I thought that was interesting. Plus, she also says, to persuade her, we shall have a new fatal five to satisfy my desires, and they are insatiable. And I thought, are we? What is Levitz trying to intimate here between those two? Again, maybe my mind just went way too much into the gutter on this issue.
Well, she's sensual. She's very sensual.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, yeah. You mentioned that beautiful panel there with her, with that warming crystal or whatever it is. That's done very well, and you get that sense from her. It's at the moment this is what she wants, and she's enjoying it. She's luxuriating in it, and then when she's interrupted by the Kun, she doesn't take it well. I mean, there's other reasons there too, but.
Well, if we go back to the bar scene, which is kind of like a follow-up from last issue, where Ayla and Vi are trying to go on a fact-finding mission about the Fatal Five. So we wind up back into the bar where they were. It's kind of a throwaway that, we just see the person that they were looking for is dead in an alleyway behind there. And the bartender had called some science police to like, hey, you need to get rid of this body. So, okay, it's not like a huge issue. It's not a huge point. There's not much to it. I think. But for me, that robot go-go stripper dancer thing, I wrote in my notes, is that the first time in this series that we've just been hit with such a blatant, overtly sexual image like that?
I had similar notes.
Yeah, because I remember you reading way back about in some of our earliest episodes about like this volume and the paper stock and just being sold to direct market was a way for them to quote unquote tell a little bit more of an adult story here and there with this concept. And what does that mean, adult story? Does it just mean more violence? Does it mean death? Does it mean you get to see people in bed together? Whatever. But I thought this is the first time because clearly, the robot has nipples, it's not like it's offensive. It's not offensive to me, but when I turned the page and hadn't remembered it, I went, oh, look at that. I think this is the first time in this volume that it has gone to this level.
Yeah, I had the same exact note. It's like, wow, that's very blatant.
Which is kind of surprising.
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see if they do anything more like that. Again, like people always say the 5 years later Legion is too dark, too adult, too whatever. And I'm like, this is 1986 and there's nipples.
Yeah. Well, and that I guess the idea of sensuality also, we have a later scene that I wanted to talk about too. That kind of goes along with that, I guess. Very different. Displayed very differently. But before we leave this page, though, did you see what else we were surprised with?
Batman frequents strip clubs. A future Batman.
So yeah, I mean, we've been talking about these little Easter eggs in these group scenes, and there's another group scene where we see some other people that I want to point out too. And I can't remember who it was. I think we talked about it last episode, where we got some feedback about those little appearances. So they're definitely on my mind. As I read these issues now, and I'm looking at the group scenes, I'm like, ooh, who are we going to see now?
Well, let's go to that other scene, and I do want to make a point too that it's not that I'm against this, and we've had a character like Laurel Kent who's been walking around in barely a bikini. Like, I get it. Like it's the future. They should be open about all that kind of stuff. I just was very surprised because it hadn't been a factor until now. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming you're talking about the Star what's her name, Dream Girl scene. Mm-hmm. Again, a small little vignette. Doesn't mean anything in the larger run, but it might later. So what'd you think of that?
Oh, well, the thrust of the scene is just that Dream Girl is not with Starboy. And so what does that mean about their relationship, and what impact will that have, right? I don't know that there's much else to that at this point.
And that she got caught by, or I should say she feels like she got caught by Quizlet.
Yeah.
Who is just, like he just wants to have fun, and he gets into this club, and again there's that Legion elitism, where he's like, of course I can get into this club, but I also think that's Quizlet's nature too.
Yeah.
It's just, he's just like that. But right, that she's dancing very closely to another man with the awful mustache and hairy chest, and
the necklace,
and the necklace. Ay. And she has to explain it away. I mean, the look on her face is that she got caught. Again, it's the future. Probably in a more modern writing sense, it wouldn't mean anything. But at the time, it obviously is to play up the soap opera dramatics of it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And I do think we get a story out of this somehow. Maybe not quite this angle, but there is something coming down the road. So,
Well, I would hope so. I mean, every time Levitz introduces something new like this, it does play out. It may not play out the way that we're expecting, but eventually we get something to it. So I totally expect this to be, like you said, a soap opera subplot that we're getting in here.
What are the Easter eggs on this page?
So there's definitely, well, there's a few, and then there's maybe one or two where it's like, well, they kind of are hinting at somebody, but you see a sort of Mr. Spock in the background in that first group shot at the top of the page. But more interestingly, in the upper right corner is someone that looks very suspiciously like Cosmic King.
Oh, the costuming.
Yeah. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there's elements of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's quite a few of those kind of the elements. There's the lady that's dancing with the star-spangled outfit that, it's not evocative of anything in particular, but anytime someone is wearing red, white, and blue with a star on their chest, that screams Captain America. I did want to ask you, though, in that second panel down with the group, we got a couple characters. One is a blonde wearing a blue outfit with a yellow lightning bolt motif, I guess evoking Mary Marvel, perhaps. But then the red-haired woman next to her looks a bit like a character from the New Teen Titans. And I can't remember her name. She's part of Brother Blood's entourage.
Oh, yeah. Again, I think it's just sort of the costume,
exactly.
color.
Yeah, it's not explicit for sure, but it's just interesting these little things that they're throwing in. Did you see anybody else?
Well, this is where LaRocque, I wish he was a little bit more specific with some of his background stuff. Like it's there. I see what he's doing, but it's not like, how cool would it be if they walked into this club and they were kind of costuming themselves after the Legionnaires? Like the Legionnaires are so popular that even their fashion sense,
that would be really cool.
Yeah, I could totally take that. The only other one I thought was the person with Spock kind of looks like, who's the host of Twilight Zone? Rod Serling?
Yes, Rod Serling. Yes,
Serling? Yeah.
I thought of that too. I just forgot to mention it. That's a good point.
Yeah, that was the only other one that hit me. The only other part of this first story that I want to talk about, obviously, is the Mon-El thing. Because I felt like, last issue when we talked about the Mon-El story, and you even said, do they ever do a follow-up to it? And I said, oh, no, I don't. I think this is it. I forgot about this because this is clearly a follow-up, and part of me wished it was even in last issue, but I kind of like that it's in this issue too.
Yeah, it helps. It helps to tie up that loose end I felt that we got with the ending of the last issue, but I feel like this is the better ending to that particular story, right? Because it's the end of the previous issue, he's quote unquote cured, and he's I mean, he did express some, not hesitation. I'm blanking on the word I was wanting to use there, but he's leery of what the future holds, and this 2-page scene just spells it out for us. This is so much a Mon-El scene because, he's so into his own head. And, we've seen that before about him. He's quiet, contemplative, and a bit obsessive, but very, very quiet about it. He's not overt. And it's only Shadowlass, really, who knows him to the extent that she does, more than anybody else on the team. And I love that dynamic with them. And, we've seen Shadowlass be supportive with him and worrisome, of course, about his condition. But here it's like, wow, this is not soap opera. This is romance. And I love that this scene in particular, because he's still in his own head, and she's trying to just comfort him, which that's fine. In terms of the story, that's all fine. And then you turn the page, and she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna take charge of the situation now because you are just too much involved in yourself and how you're feeling. Let me help you. Let me, at its flimsiest, let you
think of other things.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. A diversion. That's the word I was looking for. Let me divert your attention. But talk about sensual or sexual. This is very suggestive in the way that this is drawn, and not something that we're used to seeing how the Legionnaires are portrayed. So I thought that was really, from that standpoint, it's really interesting. The way that the way that they're showing this with her casting the darkness around, the way that she's sitting on that second page suggests that outfit is, basically about to come off of her. Not her. It's not outfit. That's actually Mon-El's coat, if you will, his outer garment that he always wears. That's just draped over her, and the scene, the close up of her lips talking to him next to his ear, and then we get the rest of that. It's like, that's pretty adult for this comic so far. So I really think that they're really starting to play that up, but they did it twice in one issue. And so I'm like, why are we suddenly ramping up that aspect of it? I don't mind it, of course. As an adult reader, it makes a lot of sense that these, lack of a better word, teenagers, because we play around with the idea of the Legionnaires as being teenagers, but really they're portrayed more as young adults. I think of them more as in their early 20s, if nothing else. So this makes sense. This seems true, especially with these two characters who have been lovers for a long time. So I really like this two-page scene that we get, and the way that the art and the characterization just come together in a very interesting and different way.
It's really beautiful. I think some of it speaks to LaRocque's design sense and sensibilities. I don't know if a scene like this would have played the same with Lytle, who his artwork is different, Mm-hmm. The use of the blacks, the bringing up dark side, the darkness. And there's, first of all, they're at the edges of space. Mon-El is a space explorer, a deep space explorer, and he's dating someone who can create total darkness. I mean, he is a therapist's dream, like, right? Like, I get it. I totally get it. I love it. And I still want more with Shady. I still want more. I'm tired of her just being his girlfriend. But I get it. And I also like the fact that it still plays within the whole suspicion thing, because he's very suspicious of the Cure, and thematically it really works.
Yeah, good point.
And just the follow up to the last issue is smart. What she says is, we get no guarantees in life, and without darkness there's no light. I mean, just the whole thing of it is beautiful. I think you're right. It is the romance element of it. And if there's one thing that Levitz likes to do, is make sure that it's not just an action book. It's everything. Just
Yeah.
like with the X-Men at this time. It's not just an action book. There's so many other places you can go with these characters. I'm ready though. I'm ready for Mon-El to go somewhere else. I'm ready for Shady to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And for them as a couple to go somewhere else too. But beautiful shot of her. I mean, God, I'm not an original art collector, but I would love to have that Shady page where she's casting all of that darkness.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
It's really great. And I think it's one of the better vignettes in the issue. One of the strongest ones because it's quiet.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm all for it. And I think it plays to the strength of the entire book if we go back to like sort of like a general thought, because even though it is a book about vignettes, almost everybody is in this issue. And if they don't get a full scene, they get snippets. There's some characters missing. We don't see White Witch and Invisible Kid and Dawnstar, but like there's a lot of characters in this book that get some meat to them.
Mm-hmm.
And this sequence also gave me a total tangent thought, if I can just step away from the issue, because I think I'm actually done with all of my notes. Yeah, outside of the second story. Why wasn't Mon-El the character that Bendis used to travel through the millennium from present day to the future? Because it's built into his story.
Yeah.
Like if his origin is still the same, where he's trapped in the Phantom Zone, they could easily have done this thing where they're like, all right, we're going to put you in the Phantom Zone. Superboy's going to find a cure, or Superman. But we have to have you in the Phantom Zone. But we're going to do something where every 100 years we're going to let you come out because we need to try something or whatever. You know what I mean? Like they could have easily made him the focus point between past and present, and it would play up the notion that he's trapped in a Phantom Zone, and it would play up the notion of giving the Legion of Superheroes some kind of like 20th century inspiration that was like a true hero of the 20th century. Now I know what they did was they wanted Rose and Thorn to be kind of like the culmination of those million years. Well, you could have done that with 1,000 years. You could have done that with Mon-El and still have a Legion connection, because in the 6 issues I've read so far, 5 issues or whatever, she's not doing anything.
True.
So I don't know why. When I got to this part and I thought, I don't know what my brain was trying to equate. I was like, wait a minute. Why couldn't it have been him? So anyway, that's a tangent. Okay. So do you have anything else? Because we're going long-winded today.
Yeah. Wow. No, I had, well, okay. I'll just throw these in. Just some minor things, that I liked because, just little details about the characters. You mentioned this already. Chameleon Boy is inviting Sunboy to play chess. That's just a little detail, the two having this thing that they do together. And you couple that with last issue where Sunboy was I think it was Sunboy. He was overseeing the repairs after Mon-El's tantrum. Just so we're seeing Sunboy do these little, he's always just kind of there doing things. He's overseeing things or he's interacting with things, not to mention the whole playboy aspect that we've talked about before. He seems to be a bit of a womanizer, maybe. So, just expanding the limits of the character a little bit in just very small ways. And the inverse to that, though, Block has really only just become a sounding board for Timberwolf. So he's becoming less interesting, which is bad because, he is a rock. There's not much else for him to do, I guess. I don't know, than sit there and listen to Timberwolf. And then finally, either I totally have forgotten this, or this is a new element and I just haven't noticed, or it's an existing element and I just haven't noticed it before. But I was, for some reason, when I got to that scene with Polar Boy, in the pool scene with Magnetic Kid and Tellus, I guess I didn't realize that he was blonde. So again, I maybe that's just a detail I've missed over the years or forgotten. I don't know, but that would just
I think we saw it in a DC Comics Presents issue, I thought.
Oh, okay.
Well, then let's get to the backup story, backup story. Do you have a synopsis of this at all, or?
I have 2 lines.
Great.
So this is Togetherness, written by Paul Levitz. This is I mentioned this near the top of the show. The artists on this one is Norm Brayfogle and Mike DiCarlo, with Arne Starr doing some inking assists. John Costanza, Carl Gafford, Karen Berger. So in this, it's just a real quick tale between Timberwolf and Lightning Lass. They're helping to clear a coastal bridge accident for Siobhan Aaron, but it turns out to be a ruse on Bryn's part to get Ayla alone so they can talk. And then Bryn gets a little. I'm editorializing the synopsis here. Bryn gets a little too close and clingy with her, causing her to react a bit angrily. But that certainly the quick conversation they have lets him know. I hope it certainly lets me know how she's feeling. That in no uncertain terms they're basically done as a couple. So that was long in coming. I think this scene. We've gotten at least one, maybe a couple scenes in previous issues with these two, where Timberwolf is trying to talk to her, and she has basically brushed him off, and maybe even more directly said, leave me alone. But he keeps trying. He's like the puppy dog that keeps trying to ingratiate himself with his. This is a bad or a poor choice of words. His master, but she's not having it. So I don't know. What did you think of this particular story?
Well, it's a follow-up to issue 7, where she returns to the team, and he again sort of puts himself in front of her and demands some kind of explanation. And at that time, we were like, okay, are we ever going to get a follow-up? Well, then after that, we get the storyline of Timberwolf enacting Karate Kid's will. And so this confrontation is post Lightning Lass's change in character and post Timberwolf's change in character, right? So it feels like, all right, so Lightning Lass had a change, they had a confrontation. Timberwolf had a change, now they have another confrontation. And I walked away by the end of it going, okay, is there going to be a third one where they come together on? I don't know, because the beats are almost exactly the same from 7. It's a little bit of a rehash. He wants to know why she just up and left. She tells him the same thing, that he wasn't there for her, that their relationship right now is only as Legionnaires. The difference between the first scene and the last scene, though, is her final thought, or her final thoughts. The first time she's like, there's nothing between us. Goodbye. We're Legionnaires. Now she's saying, oh, I do love you, but I can't go back. And I think it speaks more to her character because of whatever's going on with Vi, maybe, in that because that's a change. Where she may have blocked out her feelings to Timberwolf before, she's sort of owning them now, but also realizing that is a part of me I will never have again, and maybe a part I don't want. And I feel like once again, it's back on Timberwolf to realize that, or to come at her with a new tactic, not to win her back, but to realize that he has changed now, or, maybe Paul Levitz has forgotten that, but that he almost, she deserves better from him. I sort of took away that he's still coming at her with the same tactic. It's not going to work.
Right.
And she's different. Not only is she a Legionnaire now, she's different in her emotions. So that was my biggest takeaway with this, story-wise. Because art-wise, it's so good. It's Norm Brayfogle before he became Norm Brayfogle, and it's actually a nice, I thought, companion to the first story art-wise. It's not very jarring. It's very similar in many ways. But there's a few things in it that I just like. Some of the camera's perspectives, some of the shots. The characters look very on model when she lets loose with her powers. It's great. So in many aspects, I was like, well, we kind of read this story again, and really the only thing I got out of it was the ending. So I don't know if there's a third story, which I don't know if there is. I doubt it, but I don't know. I'm hoping it finalizes this, because this one just kind of, I was like, we've been here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that final panel where she's thinking to herself. I mean, she doesn't even say this to him, but she's admitting it to herself and for us. I love you, Bryn, but I can't take you back. I can't. And so, depending on where you put the emphasis on those words, it could lead some people to think that she is resisting wanting to go back to Bryn for some reason, by maybe some other reasons that we're not privy to yet. Or you could take it as I do now, which is, like you said, he was a part of her life that is now over, and there's no turning back. She's made a decision as far as he is concerned, and that's it.
Yeah, it's clear that Levitz likes this character. He likes Lightning Lass, and he just wants to give her a spotlight. And I know there's some other things coming up much later with her, even though I don't remember the details. Yeah, I really don't have much more for it. I wish I did. I wanted more, but that's kind of it. Now, outside of anything else about this, in terms of the art, one of the things in kind of response to this is if you go to the letter column about this issue, in issue 30, Paul Levitz even says, now again, this is another 6 issues later, we have not seen the last of the Timberwolf Light Lass relationship, but no predictions on where the subject will pop up next. Okay, so it's like, oh, okay, all right. However, in this issue's letter column, which probably was written, I don't know, like while this issue was being created or whatever, he says here in a response to Peter Brewer, who apparently was the first person to guess who Sensor Girl is, Paul Levitz says, romantics that we are, we'd like to believe that sometimes the course of true love runs smooth. Not that people don't argue, but it can just be about events and concerns without threatening the relationship. I think he's talking about Starboy and Dream Girl. Then Paul Levitz says, nevertheless, more on Lightning Lass and Shrinking Violet is in progress. Now, Levitz said in that interview, yeah, so he's lying. He clearly, no one, again, I'm done with this whole notion that, well, it was just sort of subtle and it wasn't really there. No, it's there. Paul Levitz is telling you right there, more on Lightning Lass and Shrinking Violet. It is there. So you add that plus what's going on in the letter columns, and it's just, I'm curious. I'm curious to see where it is. I really just feel bad for Timberwolf because it's like, wait a minute, he's had a growth, and I'm not seeing it on the page, and that's frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. And that's go back to the opening of this issue with him complaining to Block. It's just like, oh my God, we've seen this at least once, maybe twice before. He doesn't seem to be evolving at all, and this story demonstrates that as well. So,
yeah.
So speaking of letter column writers, so I had 2 things regarding this backup story. In particular, one thought that this story saved this issue, and the other one said that this was the, quote, best backup story and even one of the best stories of the year. I don't know about those things, but I do know. I do not agree. I don't think that this story saved the issue, nor do I think it's one of the best ones. But I mean, it is good for the reasons that we've talked about. But
right.
Yeah, there's not much else to it. I will add, though, I did find a thematic connection between the two. I thought was interesting.
Okay.
And it's a very maybe a bit of a tenuous connection, but both the stories, they both have women leaving something at the end. So Sensor Girl is leaving the team, and Lightning Lass, of course, leaving physically, but also, thematically leaving Timberwolf. And not only that, but then you have this comparison between the two sets. So you have Sensor Girl and Lightning Lass versus an overbearing / demanding Legion / Timberwolf. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading into it a little too much, but it seemed like there were some obvious, like I said, thematic connections between the two stories.
Well, you can add a third person leaving because did you catch the little interlac at the end of the first chapter?
No.
So Ultra Boy looks at Sensor Girl's mask and then says Sensor Girl's costume was empty. It says end. And down below an interlac, it says by L.M. Larry Malstead is leaving the book.
Oh, no.
Yep. That was his last inking job.
Yeah, I saw the text and I saw it was interlac. I'm like, I'll ask Peter. Oh, no.
Yep. I'm fairly certain we got Mike DiCarlo for a while beyond this. Although I have to say Mike DiCarlo and Arn Starr did a really great job on the second chapter.
Well, yeah, and I had mentioned earlier about the inker, what the inker can do with the artist in relation to the Tales cover, and then we get this backup issue, and you mentioned how this was early Norm Brayfogle.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's I think of Norm Brayfogle Batman, right?
Yeah,
like late
exactly.
80s, early 90s. So when I saw him here in 1986, I was like, oh, I didn't. Okay, that's cool.
Well, yeah, and that's just it. I would not have recognized him as, or this art as Brayfogle's art, because it is so, and maybe his style. He had a different style. How artists will develop that over time, but it's very clearly Mike DiCarlo inking this, and he's such a heavy inker. He almost overpowers, I think, the penciler, and we've talked about that before. And I can clearly see DiCarlo in especially the third page, where we get that bottom panel showing or displaying Ayla's face. It looks just like images I had seen when I was reading the New Teen Titans series when DiCarlo was inking at that time. He's just a very distinctive. He has a very distinctive style, but as I said, it can be overpowering to the penciler. That's neither here nor there. I just thought it was interesting that we got different inkers doing these things and altering what I think of as the penciler's style.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's part Arn Starr or whatever, but like the same page, the second to last panel of Light Last, where the blacks aren't so black. There's some brush stroke, there's some line work there. Mm-hmm. Instead of just being like a solid color, I think really lightens it up a little bit. And part of me is hoping that maybe if it is DiCarlo, he's learning that on Baxter paper, it's really, those lines are thick. So you have to lighten it up. Just like on the next page where Lightning Lass is going all power crazy and Timberwolf is kind of recoiling. Like his face looks great. Like it's mm-hmm. highlighted. It's got shadow work and it's got line work, but it's not so dark. It's not so thick. Right. There's some brush strokes to it. There's just some lightness to it. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see, because I'm fairly certain, like I said, we are in Mike DiCarlo territory from now on. So
okay. Well, that'll be interesting to see how I react to this then.
My one last note is, again, the letter column about this issue 24. This is from Jay Hill. 24 was very solid and could have been more aptly titled A New Beginning than issue 17. And I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of year 2 for the beginning of year 3, this is a pretty decent issue. So it has to be, because we talked more than 2 hours about it.
Yes. Well, we're going to talk a little bit longer. I have a few notes here from the Legion Companion book that I thought were interesting relating to this particular issue. Well, I guess related. So I noted, or when I was reading, I noted that LaRoque said he'd like to assign actors to the characters so that he'd get a feel to what he wanted to do with them. And considering that Emerald Empress has a significant amount of page space in this issue, I wanted to note that LaRocque's choice for an actor for Emerald Empress was Sybil Danning, who is, I think, still an Austrian-American actress, model, and film producer. She was best known for her appearances in B-movies during the late 70s and early to mid-80s. She was in Roger Corman's space opera cult classic Battle Beyond the Stars in 1980 and appeared at a bunch of films throughout the early to mid-80s, including Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, and Reform School Girls in 1986. And I had tweeted a picture of Sybil Danning.
Oh, right. Okay, that's what that was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know. What do you think, Peter? Do you see Emerald Empress in that picture I chose of her, of the actress?
Somewhat.
Somewhat, yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I felt about it too. But yeah, that's interesting. Oh, and finally, I did not realize this is neither here nor there in terms of the issue, but in the letter column from issue 30, they made mention in that, that little, I don't know what they call it, but the yellow box where they just kind of go through a bunch of different things from people's letters. I didn't know that DC was considering doing a Legion Spotlight series like the Teen Titans Spotlight.
Oh, right. Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd have been great.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the response that Levitz threw in there, or maybe it was Karen, but that while they decided not to do that, what they are going to do, pitch is coming up as the Cosmic Boy miniseries, and I don't know, maybe they mentioned something else, but yeah, that I would have loved that. I would have bought that Spotlight series if they'd done the Legion one.
I think part of it was their post-crisis new 1986-87 DC universe, and they were trying to. I think they knew things were expanding in different ways, so they had to leave some of that room for all the new titles that they were going to put out. So some of those things might have gotten pushed away.
Well, and at this point too, maybe like the Tales comic is not selling very well. And granted, it's a reprint title, but maybe the excitement over the Legion is waning a bit, and so they didn't feel like they could support another new title. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
All right, well, let's go to other areas of the DC universe at this time. In 1986, this is the month of April, when we're going to talk about Who's Who 17. We only have one Legion entry, the Persuader. Once again, the Legion books and the Who's Who books matching up, which is cool.
Yeah.
And then also going to talk about Booster Gold number 6. So I have just a few notes about the Who's Who. In the letter column, they make mention that History of the DC Universe was to be 3 issues, which is kind of weird. I thought it was always supposed to be 2, but I guess that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
My notes about Persuader, he is totally in need of a costume revamp.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting to learn, I don't know why I didn't know this, that he is apparently stronger than a normal human because of gravity. So that's good to know, because it's always so inconsistent, I feel. Like, what exactly is it? Just about the axe? Is it about other things? So it's kind of nice to know that, oh, okay, so there is some strength behind the character. So great. So now I know why he can go up against like Ultra Boy and Mon-El, because maybe he's not as powerful as them, but he does have some strength. So that was what I learned from reading that entry.
Well, and they had also demonstrated that strength in his first appearance in the Adventure Comics issue 352, I think it was. He burst through a wall, basically, and they comment about what great strength he has. But they didn't make any mention of like a higher gravity thing, higher gravity world origin. And so that's what I learned reading this was, I like how they explain that away, given that little detail. Plus, I've always liked his, it's such a Silver Age thing, this atomic axe, that can slice through gravity even. So, it affects the fundamental forces of the universe. I mean, that's just a cool idea that they really don't do a whole lot with, other than he could conceivably kill any character that he swipes the axe at, but he usually doesn't. So, it's a great concept that they don't take to the next level with this character.
Why is he called Persuader?
Because he'll persuade you to pay up. I don't know. Yeah,
such a weird name.
It is. It's such a. Well, they make mention his crimes were generally variations on the ancient protection racket. So I guess. I mean, yeah, it's not really for a guy that has such a powerful weapon. He's such a low rent villain.
I guess that makes sense. That's a good enough explanation. Anything else about that?
No.
Okay, and then finally, like we said, Booster Gold number 6. We've been following this title because there has been a Legion connection with Booster wearing a Legion ring. Certainly, this whole notion of Booster Gold and the future played out in the Legion of Superheroes Millennium issues a tiny bit. So there's a connection there, and we get a little bit more of a connection in this issue, and we'll get more of a connection in some of the next issues. So this is Booster Gold number 6. It is The Origin of Booster Gold by Dan Jurgens, Mike DiCarlo and company. I always like the cover of this one where it's kind of like a turnaround of Booster Gold and like, the glove and the ring predominantly right there, finally. Because sometimes Jurgens draws the ring and then sometimes doesn't, which is always so weird. And the whole thing is that, real quick, an alien crashes to Earth. It's miniature sized. It comes across a boy, and it shows the boy the symbol of Superman. So the boy goes to Metropolis, or is in Metropolis, and he's like, okay, we got to find Superman. So he winds up meeting up with Booster Gold, and Booster Gold creates this fake emergency so that Superman will come to Booster Gold and then they'll figure out what to do about this alien. Something's coming. And in the meanwhile, we get a little sequence between Superman and Skeet, Booster Gold's robot companion, about the origin of Booster Gold. That he's from the future. He is from the 25th century. He's from the year 2486. And he was a football star in college. He went to college in Gotham City, which is kind of fun. But then he used to bet on his own games, and it was found out, and there was a scandal, and he left his family. He had a mother and a twin sister that we learned, and eventually winds up at the Space Museum. Yay! I love the Space Museum, which was a 50s, 60s sci-fi DC concept where a young man would take his son into the Space Museum and tell him stories about the past. And here we get the Space Museum. It's kind of cemented within the DC universe. And much like the Legion of Superheroes Millennium issue, Booster Gold gets the notion of what it would be like to be a superhero back in the 20th century by seeing all these little vignettes here and there of what's going on at that time. So he decides to steal a whole bunch of stuff, including a Legion flight ring, including a time bubble that belongs to Rip Hunter. So Booster Gold's like a night watchman. And he gets some gloves. He gets control bands that belong to an alien menace. I'm not sure if we ever find out what that's from. So about the ring, though, they don't say Legion flight ring. They say a ring that enables its bearer to fly, and a force field belt, both of which were once used by a green-skinned individual who helped save a president's life. And that's a story that will be coming up in Booster Gold in a couple issues. So again, sidestepping any mention of the Legion at this point, but clearly using Legion concepts between the ring and the force field belt. And then he takes Rip Hunter's time machine and travels back to the past. He also takes a 20th century credit card, which I don't know how that's supposed to work, but whatever. And he goes back in time. Superman is not happy. He basically calls him a 20th century thief, and which is true. And then I also love Booster Gold sort of retaliates and says, look, you aren't the lord of the superheroes, you sanctimonious jerk. And then that's where they're attacked by the aliens, and that's where that issue ends. So there's a lot to take away here with the origin of Booster Gold. But I wanted to get your thoughts real quick. What did you get a chance to read it? What'd you think? What'd you just think of this sort of off story?
Yeah, I read it. I always like you. I always love the Space Museum stuff, and I like how it's revealed that he's incorporated all these things that have been if you were reading the Booster Gold series at the time, were a bit of a mystery. So why does he have it? How did he get it? That kind of stuff. So we finally get all that. I'm glad to hear that you say that the green skin individual thing we actually see that, because when I read that, I was thinking, well, how did these two artifacts get to the 25th century from the 31st century? So or 30th century. I'm sorry, I'm confusing my two Legion books now. So I'll have to definitely read that upcoming issue to find out more of the details. And I guess really the other thing I really like about this issue is the conversation and the philosophies argued between Booster Gold and Superman. Superman, as you just said, Booster Gold says, you're not the Lord of the Heroes, you sanctimonious jerk. But they both have valid points, right? Yeah, he stole some things, but he's trying to do good, but then he's also trying to make money off of it, and Superman's, the moral, it takes the moral high ground as he often does. So they don't really play with that too much. I mean, they make their points, but then the plot of the story moves them on from that. So it'd be interesting to see more of that conflict between the two characters, or concepts even with other characters, play out. So as much as there is a Legion connection to Booster Gold, I'll be reading the issues along with you to see how that plays out specifically. But the stuff I just mentioned between him and Superman, but yeah, it was. I haven't been all that enamored with Booster Gold as we've been reading these issues so far, but this one I really took a liking to.
Well, here's where this issue, I think, makes itself important within the larger DC universe, because for a number of reasons. Unlike some reviews that I've read online about this issue that said the post-crisis Superman wasn't really showing up anywhere at this point. Well, that's not true, because Action Comics, Superman, and DC Comics Presents were still going on at this time. But that's still under Julius Schwartz. Those titles are still the pre-crisis Earth 1 Superman, even if he's talking about like post-crisis stuff. And we're supposed to be ramping up for the John Byrne Superman, which will come out in June or July of this year of 1986. But we're not there yet, right? It's still April. We haven't even gotten Alan Moore's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. This version of Superman, outside of an appearance in like Justice League of America 250, this is kind of the first real appearance of the post-crisis Superman that is the closest to John Byrne's version, because he does not recognize the Legion ring.
Oh, true.
He clearly says, your ring is particularly complex, obviously the product of a superior technology. If he was Superboy, he would know who that is, what that ring is.
Mm-hmm.
It has an L on it. So I think this is that weird limbo Superman that is just on the verge of becoming the John Byrne Superman, where maybe there's some, I have to wonder what's going on in the background. Like, do they know, okay, we're separating Superman from the Legion mythos. And did Dan Jurgens know this at this point? Because it's right there. He does not recognize the the ring. The other thing that this issue does, and we talked about this last episode too, is it talks about that there's gaps in time, right? Like there's a void in time. There's a tremendous gap in our historical records. Skeets talks to Superman. And that's the same thing that was going on in issue number 23 of the Legion of Superheroes. We're going back into the 20th century. Information is lost. The time stream is all kind of, wonky. And I made mention at that time, Skeet says it again, our knowledge of your era is sketchy. And I sort of wondered, okay, was this a DC thing where they're like, all right, let's look at what titles we can talk about the new rules of time travel. We can talk about it in the Legion. We can talk about it in Booster Gold because he's from the future. So on that level, that's huge. That's really kind of huge that they're playing along here. Now, you sort of get the sense, okay, that maybe this is Superman that kind of plays in the Byrne playground, but yet it's still the Julius Schwartz Superman, because he talks about like, oh, he has knowledge of that alien language, right? Like he has experience of the larger universe, of aliens and their civilizations. That's not really something that Byrne played with early. The Bronze Age Superman was the one that could speak, a million languages and knew things about the universe in an intimate way, not just the way that Byrne's Superman learned about it from just sort of like the teachings of Jor-El. So that's an interesting notion. So that splash page where Superman is standing there with Booster Gold at the dam or wherever they're at, like, I'm like, okay, there it is. If my research is right, and the issues from 1986 that I have, and using the DC Universe app and other places, this might very well be the first appearance of the closest thing to John Byrne's Superman that we get before John Byrne.
Mm.
And I just think that's a fascinating notion.
Yeah, I wonder how John Byrne felt about that.
Or, like I said, maybe there was some communication. I mean, Jurgens is interesting in the regards that, okay, so we know that he has a lengthy career on Superman as well, and he's laying some of the groundwork here, like Metropolis Centennial Park, which was something that is very prominent within his run. And I don't know if this is the first appearance of it, but that's a very Jurgens thing. I don't know. I really dug everything about like learning all this and kind of putting it into play within the larger conversations that we're having here on the Legion podcast.
Yeah, I would have to believe that there was some communication and some planning about what they were going to do with Superman at this point, given what you quoted that Superman says about the Legion ring, and the way that it's presented here on the page, where you clearly see the L of the ring, and there's no Superman makes no mention of the Legion, as you said. So yeah, I think you're right. I think you've hit on something very interesting.
So when we get that two-parter with the Legion that's coming up, it's I don't remember if Superman's in it, but it's going to be interesting to see. And the only other appearance that Superman really has at this time outside of his titles, which again are still kind of stuck in Julius Schwartz mode, the only slight appearance that he has is in Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, where we just get the hint. We get like bits of dialogue, or we see him talking to the president, but we don't actually see him. And that's a whole other tale, that's a whole other continuity. But the feeling of that Superman that Frank Miller is playing with is also kind of evocative of what John Byrne is playing with too. I think the way that Frank Miller plays with Superman in Dark Knight Returns is then echoed in the way that they play with Superman and President Reagan throughout Legends. It's clearly a direct connection between the two. Not that he hasn't ever met a president before, but just the way that they talk. So,
yeah.
And all of this is laying groundwork for the eventual Superboy story that we're going to get, which is the only reason why I'm really paying attention to it, because it makes sense. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading more and seeing if it plays out differently later. Okay. Have we talked enough?
I think we are talked out on this issue.
Give us an issue and we'll give you 3 hours worth of content.
Boy, I honestly, Peter, I thought this would be a quick one just based on the kind of the how light the plot really is. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in here.
So next up, we'll have Legion of Superheroes issue 25. That'll be the next time. That'll be the next issue that we cover. So if you're playing along with us, please let us know what you think of issue 25. That'll be the start of year 3, and it'll also be the start of the wrap-up of this Who is Sensor Girl mystery. So all of these things that we've been talking about, we'll have to see if any of it sort of plays out or if it goes in a whole new way. And I'm looking forward to it. So if you don't know who Sensor Girl is by now, you're going to find out next issue.
Good.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope. I think it's time to head on out.
All right, let's do it.
Long live the Legion Project Podcast.
Take care, Eric.
You too. Bye-bye, Peter.